That we don't have any interface. Test, 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 test.
mid-session, but a very hectic time in the legislature. So feel free to chill, keep mixing and mingling, and grab some food in the back. And we'll start as soon as the member gets here. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I first want to thank you for taking your time to attend our event today, and I apologize for the slight delay, but we had to wait for the main star. I would like to introduce myself. I am Jewel Unga, a 1L, a member of BALSA, Black Law Student Association, here at McGeorge. Before we get into the real material of the event, I would like to welcome up Professor O'Neill so she can introduce herself. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Dr. Weber, we are so happy that you're here with us this evening. And my name is Erin O'Neill. I'm the director of the Capital Center for Law and Policy here at McGeorge, and our Capital Lawyering Concentration, which is a course of study for students who are interested in careers and education at kind of the intersection of law and public policy. We are so fortunate to be located here in Sacramento with close proximity to our legislature, and to have so many students who are interested in getting involved in the political process and making their voices heard. Khalil's a great example of that. He is president of BALSA here at McGeorge and also one of our Capital Lawyering students. And when he came to me with this idea for this event earlier in the year, I said, that is fantastic. Let's do it 100% in support. So I'm so happy to see it coming to fruition tonight and happy that you're all here. I'm going to welcome Dean Schwartz up here to just give a couple of remarks, and then we'll get started with the conversation.
Good evening and welcome. We are absolutely thrilled that you're here, and we're so honored by the presence of Dr. Weber. Really a big deal. Thank you so much. I do have a theory that there is no one in Sacramento who says no to Khalil. So that is a background. I haven't worked out the complete theory to it yet. I just know that I never have, and I haven't met anyone who said no to him. So I have a theory that it just doesn't ever happen. But we are so glad and honored that you're here. So excited to hear what you have to share with us. As Sacramento's law school, we really do have an incredible cadre of students who are passionate about public service, making a difference, and that's the life that you've lived. So thank you for being here, and we look forward to your remarks.
Thank you. Before we get started with the fire chat portion, I believe it's very important to understand the background of this magnificent woman and understand where she's coming from. Dr. Akilah Weber was elected April 2021 to represent California's 79th Assembly District, which includes La Mesa, Lemon Grove, Spring Valley, La Presa, and parts of the cities El Cajon and San Diego. Dr. Akilah Weber is a medical doctor, educator, former city council member, San Diego native, and a mom to 2 young boys. Dr. Weber is a board-certified obstetrician, gynecologist, and she is the founder and past director of the Pediatric and Adolescent Gynecology Division at Rady's Children's Hospital, San Diego. She also served as an assistant clinical professor in the Department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences at UCSD. Dr. Weber has served on the La Mesa City Council, where she's worked to implement the city's climate action plan and champion the creation of the Community Police Oversight Board and the La Mesa Homelessness Task Force. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, Dr. Weber has been at the front lines of the city's efforts to protect public health. Her long record of community activism includes serving on the boards of La Mesa Conversations and the La Mesa Foothills Democratic Club, and volunteering as the science coordinator links to STEM programs for children who are underrepresented in STEM fields. Dr. Weber grew up in the Oak Park neighborhood of San Diego, California, and graduated from Encanto Elementary and Gomper Secondary School. She earned her bachelor degrees at the University of Xavier of Louisiana and her medical degree at the University of Rochester Medical School. Dr. Weber completed her residency in obstetrics and gynecology at Chicago Cook County Hospital and her fellowship in pediatric adolescents gynecology at Cincinnati's Children's Hospital. Dr. Weber lives in La Mesa, California with her boys, Kadir and Jalil. She is a member of the Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and the Links Incorporated. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Weber, for joining us tonight. It's a very busy legislative session, as always. There's a
a number of important deadlines coming for the California legislator, and specifically an individual legislator. So thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to spend it with us here at McGeorge. So let's jump in. I guess we'll start broad and say, what led you to become a legislator? What's your passion?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you all for being here. You know, I've known you for a while, and you were right earlier. No one can say no to Khalil. I think you asked me, I ran into you at the coffee shop here in Sacramento, and you said, hey. And I was like, oh, sure. He won't remember. And then, you know, next thing I know, something comes across my desk. I'm like, oh my goodness. But thank you, and I enjoy being able to come out and kind of talk about my journey, the importance of being an advocate, being involved regardless of what area you actually focus on or what field you're in. So, you know, my journey into this field is a very interesting one. I think a lot of people who look at me from the outside may have thought that this was potentially in my plan at some point, and it never was. One of the things that was not mentioned in my bio, and I appreciate that, is that I am the daughter of Dr. Shirley Weber, who happens to be our current Secretary of State, and prior to that was the Assembly member for the 79th Assembly District. And I think people just always assumed that this was what I was going to do. But they could not be farther from the truth. My mother was, you know, in politics growing up, and so I saw the good, the bad, but also the very ugly. And that definitely turned me off from wanting to go into this myself. However, both of my parents were very active. My father was an attorney. He practiced, he was in private practice for a very long time, and then he became an administrative law judge, but he was very active within the community, had been president of our local NAACP, was one of the founding members of the Earl B. Gilliam Bar Association, which is a San Diego version of the Black Lawyers Association in San Diego. We went to the bar convention every single year. That was our summer vacation every year. Wherever the Black lawyers had their convention, that's where we were. And so they taught my brother and I, and they instilled in us the importance of giving back and keeping the doors open, and making sure that everyone has a voice, even those who are oftentimes believe that they don't have a voice. And so I was always very active, but just in the STEM field, making sure that we keep those doors open, because I understand that people knock down doors so that I could go into the STEM fields. And so I was always active in whatever community I lived in. And as you heard from my bio, I moved around a lot for education and training. And it wasn't until I came back to San Diego and started living in La Mesa in 2014 that I started really looking at the role of politics. And specifically, there was an incident that occurred in my city where a young high school Black female senior was slammed to the ground by a police officer. And there was a lot of outcry from the students at the school, some of the members of the community. We went to a town hall, and no one was listening to these kids. And one of them said, you know, when I look at you talking about the members of the city council and the mayor, I don't see anyone that understands me or understands my story. And that person was right. Everyone on that council was white. They had never had anyone that was Black. They were all, no offense, lawyers. And, you know, there is a certain way in which you are taught to think, right? But when you represent a diverse community, not only in race and gender and ethnicity, but also in the things that people go through and the jobs that people have, it's important that you have different voices at the table. None of them had young kids. I did at the time, and there were a lot of families in our area. And so I decided to run for that position, just to make sure that we had a different kind of voice, really able to listen to our entire electorate and really represent everyone. And it was great because I could still have my practice and, you know, do the political thing. And then there was a lot of shakeup after the election in 2020. And this position came open in 2021 when Governor Newsom appointed my mom to become Secretary of State. And I had watched her, all of the amazing things that she had done. She had some very, very significant, very groundbreaking legislation. So I saw that she was doing a lot of good and that you could do a lot of good, that you could come up here and unlike some of our people in Washington where it takes years to get stuff done, you can come up here and do a lot of good. I also saw a lot of interesting things that she voted on that I did not agree with from a healthcare standpoint. And I had no problems going up there. Why did you vote for this? Do you know what this does? You know, and it just really reaffirmed for me the need for having diverse voices at the table. And when you looked at the legislature then, and even now, especially over on the Senate side, there is that void from the healthcare perspective. And so instead of doing what a lot of my other colleagues do, which is get into our doctor's workroom and complain about everything that we are being forced to do, I decided to run. And was very lucky, was very successful with that race. And so that's how I ended up here. But by no means, if you had asked me, you know, 5, 10 years ago, would I see myself here? I would say absolutely not. I didn't spend all that time, energy, and money to become a doctor, to then pivot and somewhat pivot, because I still do practice, but pivoting and come up here in Sacramento.
Perfect. Very inspiring and very relevant to our next question. I guess as a medical doctor, now legislator, how does your background reflect in your policy priorities?
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things that I think happens a lot here in Sacramento is the belief that everything happens in a silo. That when you are focused on an education bill, that it's really only going to be about education, or when you're focused on a transportation issue, it's really just about transportation, or if you're focused on environmental issues, just about the environment, without realizing that all of these things merge together. And they merge together to create communities, and they merge together to create communities that are either healthy or unhealthy. And so we in the healthcare industry started talking about this a long, long time ago. When I was in med school, many, many moons ago, we used to talk about the non-compliant patient. And this was the patient that either didn't show up, was late, didn't take the medication like we told them to. And so, you know, it's like nothing is changing. And then when we started to look a little deeper, we realized, well, this particular individual is late because they had to take 3 different buses to get here. This particular individual is not taking the insulin because they don't have a refrigerator at their house. And so what we started realizing is that your health, about 80%, 85% of your health has more to do with societal factors than it has to do with anything that we do in the clinic, in the hospital, or in the operating room. And so if we really want to create healthy communities, we've got to tackle the issues that are impacting the communities in which those individuals live. The fact that you can go on the county's website or here the state of California's Department of Health website and type in someone's zip code, and that will tell you their life expectancy. In the United States, that should never happen, but it does. And so one of the things, what drives my policy, the bills that I introduce, the bills that I support, is the real recognition that the things that we do, even if they are not specifically normal health, will impact the health of Californians. And getting other people to recognize that as well. We don't do that. When decisions were made about the highway system, the transportation system, to go through certain communities and avoid other communities, then that was a decision that those communities would be exposed to different environmental toxins, which would ultimately result in what we see now, which are higher levels of respiratory disease and asthma in certain socioeconomic and ethnic groups. Those were policies that cities and states made as to where we were going to do this. When you look at, even when you're talking about ships that are coming in, where are you bringing them into different communities that are already established? And then what kind of things are you doing to try to mitigate the impacts that will have on their health? We've had a lot of storms recently, right? And unfortunately, some of you may have seen this. In San Diego, with one of the storms, you saw cars floating down the street. Like, that was my district. And that has to do with decisions that had been made at a local level to either invest or not invest, to clean up or not clean up. And now you created a situation where you have people who are living in houses that have mold, or not having houses at all. And so these are policy decisions that ultimately impact someone's health. And so that's what drives me. And then the other thing is, we as physicians, we know how to work with other people. Because that's the only way we're going to be able to heal our patients, right? I may not like you as a person. There are many physicians that I just did not like. But I knew that I had to work with them, right? I had to stand across a patient and operate with them, because I could do one thing and they could do something else. And so it's not like I'm going to go in my corner because you're in a different party, or I'm going to stay over here because I don't like the way you think, or whatever. We all have to work together. And we also can't keep doing the same thing for everybody. Everyone's body is different, so it may be the same type of surgery, or you may have the same diagnosis, but everyone is different. And so we don't keep doing the same thing for everybody because we won't get the same outcome. But that's what we do here in Sacramento. And, in any political field, you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and then wonder why you don't get a different result.
Right.
So, my background from a healthcare perspective is very different in the way in which I look at what we're doing and the way in which I interact with other people to solve problems.
Thank you for that. And you mentioned something that I recently learned, maybe within the past 2 years, that relates to the life expectancy based on your social determinants.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the concept is called social determinants of health. And I think in a lot of your legislation, you mentioned that. Didn't you? I believe you recently introduced a bill to require screenings. Could you touch more on that briefly?
I did, yeah. It is one of the things that I focused on a lot. When I got up here, I formed the select committee in the Assembly on the social determinants of health, and we have hearings up and down the state about different issues. And then last year I had AB 85 that specifically dealt with social determinants of health screening and allowing for providers to be reimbursed for that screening, and also for community organizations that the individual or the patient is referred out to also get some form of reimbursement. That's the only way that we're really going to change the health trajectory of our residents here in California, is to start tackling these things preventively. And it's also, more financially, smart, because if you spend far less money preventing something than actually treating it down the line, with all the medications, hospitalizations, surgeries, et cetera. So yes, that went through both houses. The governor chose to veto it, so I'm bringing it back this year.
Cool. Look forward to supporting it. And it kind of brings us to our next question, but as a Black woman and a Black mother, I guess that background and personality reflects in a good amount of your bills, as I've been tracking and we've worked on certain bills. What are some of the most, what are your most favorite bills or bills that you supported or introduced that support Black women's health and Black maternal health?
Yeah. So I came to Sacramento in an interesting time, because right after I got here was Roe v. Wade was overturned. And I just thought to myself, wow, what a time it is to have an OBGYN in the legislature, to help craft some of these bills to ensure that women here in California and those who seek to come to California for care are able to get the care that they rightfully need and rightfully should have. And so I have worked on a lot of those bills to ensure that women can get whatever kind of reproductive health care they need, that providers will be reimbursed for it so that cost is not a barrier. I've definitely supported the bills to ensure that providers do not end up losing their medical license or being able to be sued in another state. Also to ensure that our medical records here do not necessarily have to be released to those states that may be hostile to a woman seeking abortion care. And we know that, unfortunately, when you have these kind of restrictive laws that you're seeing in other states, it disproportionately impacts Black women and lower socioeconomic women. And so to be able to help expand that access and open doors here in California for not only our residents, but for those who come and seek care here has been extremely important. But I would probably say that I think the bills that I am currently working on will probably be most impactful for Black women here in California. We have a crisis with our maternal morbidity and mortality rates when we're talking about Black women. Black women are more likely to unfortunately die as a result of being pregnant or in labor or in a postpartum period. And they're more likely to incur some kind of medical harm as well. And so, this has been revealed time and time again through different studies, results, statistics. And so we are looking to address a couple of those issues. So a few years ago, Senator Holly Mitchell did a bill that required implicit bias training in the hospitals that have labor and delivery units. The Attorney General just did an audit, and what was found was that the majority of the hospitals were not compliant with this new law, that they had not actually done what was required of them. And so there is a bill that I am joint authoring with Assemblywoman Lori Wilson, who's chair of the Black Caucus, and all of the members of the Black Caucus have signed on to really strengthen that legislation, to ensure that the implicit bias training is not only done for the physicians, but also really anyone that may touch or encounter a pregnant patient, and to also start looking at statistics, because what I want to know is it's great that you're doing training, but is it really changing the outcome of our patients? And that to me is most critical, is to actually go back and see, okay, for those that did training, this hospital, you may be 100% compliant, but where are your ultimate numbers in terms of maternal morbidity and mortality rates? So I'm excited about that bill. The other bill that I am very much focused on is dealing with the issue of the maternity ward closures. And so we are seeing a large number of maternity wards closing up and down this state, which ultimately limits access for our most vulnerable to actually be able to deliver in their communities. As an OBGYN, I know how critical it is to be able to get to a hospital when you're pregnant quickly, and not only just any hospital, but a hospital that is equipped with OBGYNs, that are equipped with OB anesthesia and all of the beds and monitoring and nursing that you need to be able to deliver your child safely and for you to be safe. I would always tell my patients, our goal is healthy mommy, healthy baby. And we want to make sure that everyone that goes into our hospitals comes out alive and has a live baby with them. And when you close these maternity wards, you are decreasing that chance. And these wards are being disproportionately closed in our inner cities and in our rural areas. And so we have a bill to require further notification or earlier notification so that we can kind of see, why are you closing? Why do you feel like you need to close your doors? Is it financial? Is it workforce? Is it shortage in your delivery numbers? What impact will it have on the surrounding community? If you close, is the next labor and delivery an hour away? And whether or not there's something from a state level that we can do. And also, require earlier notification of the community and have some community input as well. Because these things, like I say, do not just impact that hospital, it impacts the entire community and the health of that community. So I'm really excited about those two, and I think that those two specifically will have the most impact on Black women here in California.
I love that. And I think that's one of the beautiful things of being in the legislature and being in law school and being surrounded by the law, is that it just only adds to your background and your perspective of the world, I guess, and sees how you can change it, and analyzes what you can change based on what words on text say. And I say that to say, as law students, it's very interesting, because as a student of economics, I apply that economic lens to all that. So I see some of our economic concepts in Oak Park. I think one of my first studies in undergrad was in gentrification, and then that led me to what policies allow gentrification to occur, and then legislative action, and now, I'm surrounded by the law. So let's understand the rules of the legislator and the laws that we write, and how what we write into text, into law, impacts directly within whatever delay occurs our communities. So as law students, I think it's very interesting to apply whatever we understand and whatever we know are our backgrounds, and don't let the law kind of guide us, but let our understanding of the law kind of and integrate with our understanding of the world to make the changes that we see. I think you do a great job at edifying that as a medical doctor, gynecologist, now influencing the law as you've seen from problems you've seen in your communities and in your background. So we are in Black History Month, and a very big bill package was just introduced, and you know where I'm going with this. Our reparations package, the Legislative Black Caucus just introduced our reparations package. And if you know me, you know that my analysis in California of race-based policies and race-based law is an uphill battle. Not even if we had Prop 209, but overall under the 14th Amendment and our Equal Protection Clause, it is very hard to pass anything based on race. So with reparations package that has been introduced and the recommendations adopted by the California Reparations Task Force, what do you see are our next steps, and what hardships and obstacles do we need to overcome in introducing some of our legislation?
Well, thank you so much for that question. I think the Reparations Task Force, with the assistance of the Attorney General, did a great job in terms of framing the need for reparations. And you are completely correct, and you and I worked on another, bill that dealt with, race stuff, which we might get to a little later.
Yes,
but because of Prop 209, because of the 14th Amendment, it is challenging to do anything based on race. And that is why when you read the reparations report, it's not about race, it's about harm. And it's about repairing the harm that was done. And when you look at it through that lens, which is absolutely correct, it's hard to refute, in my opinion, why reparations shouldn't happen. When you look and you see, well, we gave reparations for Japanese, we've given, Jewish people have gotten reparations. We are in the process of also figuring out how we can give more reparations to our Native Americans, as they should. Black Americans or people of African descent whose ancestors were enslaved in this country are definitely due reparations to repair the hundreds of years of harm that was inflicted upon them. One of the interesting things is, as was stated, I'm a San Diego native, and my parents are from the South. My dad's from Louisiana, and my mom is from Arkansas. And You know, I always thought that here in California, we were so much better than the South. Like, you know, I used to say, well, at least my people left, right? You know, and what is it that California possibly did to Africans in terms of slaves? Because we didn't have slavery here. And that's one of the questions, like, why do we need to talk about reparations in California? We didn't have slaves here. And when you look at harm and you look at that 1,100-page report, it really lays out the harm that was done, that even though we weren't a slave state, we were very complicit in slavery. We still allowed for them to come in and take people back down south. We still enacted policies and legislation that prevented blacks from getting jobs or advancing or getting housing and things like that. We did that here, even though we did not technically have slaves per se here. And so there has been a lot of harm that was done. And so I think our first obstacle is overcoming the belief that nothing happened here in California. That we don't need to have that conversation here in California because we're not one of those southern states that had plantations. We did have a different form of plantations here, right? And so that is why our first move in our package that you're referring to is a resolution that I have authored along with the other members of the CLBC as co-authors, which is ACR 135, which is a resolution that just affirms what was found in the California Reparations Task Force. It lays out some of those harms that we talk about. The fact that, you know, California did not allow for interracial marriages. And even after the law was struck down by California Supreme Court, the California legislature took 11 years to change the law after that, because they didn't want to. And so you start to read and see, and you're just like, oh my goodness, we were very complicit in a lot of these things. And so the resolution just affirms what that is. And then we follow that up with another bill, which is an official apology from the state of California to apologize for the harms that were inflicted upon the descendants of African slaves here. And then we have some other bills. But the first part is to just really educate people that, yes, there were things that happened here in California. You know, it is a tough budget season this year. And I know people were like, where's my check?
Right.
But even outside of it being a tough budget year, when you look at the report and you look and you see the widespread, systematic harm that was done, you realize that a check isn't just going to do it. There are policies that must be implemented. There are things that must be set up to really repair that harm. And so this is a multi-year effort. It is just our first year of what will be many, many, many years. Every year, until we complete this, the caucus will come out with their reparations package. I think the bills that we have are a great first step. It's not our only step. But in the meantime, you know, we also are looking for our community organizations and our community allies to also go out and educate people within the different areas within California so that they can then go and put pressure on their representative to say, hey, are you voting for these things? You need to support this stuff. We as California need to lead the way because we are being watched, not only nationally, but internationally. You're hearing of African countries like Ghana starting to talk about reparations, and they're looking to see, okay, what is California doing? And so this is going to definitely be a collaborative effort. I'm excited that I can be a part of it. I'm very proud that this was all started from my mother and her bill. But if you haven't read the report, at least the executive summary, I strongly recommend that you do. It's on the Attorney General website. I think the executive summary may be like 50 or 60 pages, and you guys are in law, so you should be used to reading a bunch of stuff. But it does a good job of laying things out.
I think it's 63 to be exact.
Okay.
I will admit that I read it as soon as it came out.
Yes.
And I'm wanting to get my hands on the 1,100-page report, for which I understand most of I think the CLBC and the committee members are the only recipients of, and maybe the governor and AG.
Well, actually, the leather bound one you're talking about is probably just the CLBC and the governor and stuff. But every member of the legislature got a copy of it. And I reminded some of them about that the other day, like, you got a copy, make sure you've read it before this resolution hits the floor. And it's on the website too. The entire report is on the website.
So you law students, whenever we have time in between, I know midterms are approaching, whenever we have time, the executive summary really is actually very digestible, but it covers a lot of information in a brief timeline, because as we mentioned about social determinants of health, Dr. Weber mentioned things like ports, and one of my studies in undergrad was related to gentrification, but how that emanates from redlining. And if you were here when I asked Mayor Tubbs about redlining, that's one of the things that reparations addresses, is how we were systematically denied housing as a result of intentional and arbitrary line drawing based on the interest of government and private banks. And that is what the reparations package touched on, is how can we give land back? And Senator Bradford has a bill that I'm happy to see, which builds on one of his previous bills that provides land back to black residents in California who had their land stolen from them, through eminent domain policies during that time. And that's one of the biggest things in the reparations conversation has been check versus land. And I think we're achieving a lot of the underlying policies with the reparations package, not just in the check, but land back, and then also our health back as well.
Health, education,
Right.
Environmental issues, jobs. I have a bill that strengthens the Crown Act, because that was groundbreaking, but it did not reach our sports outside of schools, and a lot of kids, even, my own, you're in league or club or travel, and so we've seen the videos of our young Black children having to cut off their hair at different sporting events. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen here in California.
So speaking of efforts led by your mother, you know where we're going next. We worked together on AB 2774 in 2022. Could you review the lengthy history of the bill's language and its evolution to the governor's desk, starting with its first iteration introduced by your mother?
All right, so 2774, Assembly Bill 2774 dealt with local control funding formula, or LCFF. And this was an issue that my mother had dealt with a couple of times in the past, because the reality is that, unfortunately, here in California and the United States, Black students are at the bottom of the academic achievement outcome. And this is not something that is new. This has been a chronic issue. And so there had been attempts to direct that funding towards Black students so that you can create more programs or whatever the school wanted to do to specifically focus on improving Black student achievement and outcomes and their scores. The first time my mom introduced it, I can't remember what happened. I don't think it even got to the governor's desk. The second time, there was a decision to kind of hold the bill, and they were able to get $300 million one-time funding in the budget for the lowest performing students. It did not focus just on Black students, it was lowest performing students across the board. That was one time. So 2774 was an attempt to change some of the categories to just focus specifically on the lowest performing students based on race. And so right now it happens to be African American. If people did what they were supposed to do, then in the future it wouldn't. It may be another group. But to really focus money on those that clearly need it the most. This was, the obstacle was Prop 209 and the 14th Amendment. And so we could not focus anything specifically on race. We could not, even though it didn't say black race, the fact that it just said race was not something that we were able to get through. However, we were able to have very good conversations with the governor and some of his staff in the education department. And so we came up with a formula called the equity multiplier formula, where we were able to focus on our lowest performing students, add in a couple of other variables to try to maximize the amount of funds that could be directed towards Black students. Now, again, it's not just Black students, but trying to figure out what else we could put in that formula that could get us the most amount of Black students. We did that. I was very happy to see that not only did we do that formula, but we also got $300 million, not one time, but ongoing in the budget. And so that is what we have. We actually, with a trailer bill that came out recently, I think they actually gave more money towards the equity multiplier formula. We'll see what happens now that you know, our budget is going in a different way than the governor thought it was originally. But it is a line item and it is ongoing, so it's not something that we have to keep going back and asking for every year, every other year. But the obstacle was really, you know, Prop 209 and the 14th Amendment.
Right. I mean, of course, remember that year, it was a monumental year in that we received not a single no vote, if I remember correctly, in both houses to make it to the governor's desk. So the effort of activists, organizers, the effort put forth by your mom, and then of course yourself to lead that, carry that bill and get it to where it is now was monumental. So thank you for that. But also wanted to reify that if you're always watching my story on Instagram or following me, I'm always talking about how we can undermine, circumvent, or overcome Prop 209. And then normally, you know, the 14th Amendment, because it has limited our ability to actually advocate for policies that strictly benefit us, but also because we know it's needed. And even with the recent Supreme Court decision in Students for Fair Admissions v. Harvard, it's kind of also narrowed us even a tiny bit, even though we're in California with Prop 209, because the standard to reach strict scrutiny has now, needs to be deemed a little bit more empirical and logical, as Justice Roberts said. So, you know, we still have a lot legal in the judiciary as well as legislative challenges to overcome in order to advance these policies. And then, of course, once we advance the policy and get it signed by the governor, to fight for its interpretation as law students and lawyers and the judiciary. So there's still much to be done in the next 5 years, of course, with the reparations package that will be challenged in every way that we have. We know what's coming because it's not an argument that's not novel. It's been expressed, it's been invoked, and we've lost, we've won, but it's a lot of battling that. It requires a lot of young labor and a lot of young minds as well.
And that's why the issue of harm instead of race is key for reparations.
Right. And to that, I guess, what advice would you give young advocates interested in becoming a lawmaker or an attorney in the Capitol?
Well, do it. No, just kidding. Well, first of all, I think, and I have felt this way for a long time, that the law degree is the most powerful degree that you could get. I actually wanted to be a lawyer, and my dad said no. Which was interesting because, like I said, he was a lawyer. So I was like, fine, I'll get my MD JD. And I actually took the LSAT, did very well, and he was so unimpressed. He was just like, and what was your MCAT score, and where are we going to med school? But, you know, it gives you the ability to really kind of do anything and go anywhere. But I think, Khalil, you kind of hit it earlier when you were talking about don't let law school or the degree change you or who you are. Recognize that you all come from individual backgrounds, you have your own unique perspectives, And that, with the law degree, is what will help change policy, especially for those that are most vulnerable and for those who oftentimes don't have a voice. So, you know, I think that getting a law degree is a great idea, but you know, I always tell people you don't have to be a lawyer to make change, and I am an example of that. And so even if you choose not to go to law school, which would be great because you need diversity of thought, you can and you still should be active. And if you choose to run for an office, run. You bring a unique perspective that other people don't, because not everybody is exactly like you, but you do represent people who think and have similar experiences as you, and those voices deserve to be at the table as well. I also think that even if you choose never to run for office, being involved and making sure that those who have chosen for office know who you are and that you are holding them accountable is extremely important. Because a lot of times you see your electeds coming around when it's time for an election, but do you see them at any other times? Or the promises that they've made you as they're running for office, have they kept them? Are you watching? You know, I will often tell people, my son keeps calling me, that you should watch and see. You know, just because someone happens to look like you or represent you in the legislature or in city council or whatever, doesn't mean that they're voting your interest or the interest of your community. And so it is extremely important to watch them and watch their votes and watch how they move and watch where the money's going. Because oftentimes people aren't watching. And then you look around and you say, why is my community not improving? Why is my community not getting the funding? And I'm seeing that those communities over there are getting libraries built and, you know, enhancements in their schools and this and that. What's happening with my community? But you're not paying attention to see how your representative is representing you. And so even if you never go to law school, even if you don't choose to run for an office, we all have a responsibility to, number one, vote, and two, hold those that we vote for, and even those that we don't, accountable to represent us and our districts in the best manner as possible.
Beautiful. Thank you. That concludes that. I don't have any more questions for you. And I can't think of any off the dome. So we can close out of this portion and we can open up questions to the floor for any students or attendees, alumni, faculty, deans who may have questions, and we can, you know, have about 10, 20 minutes for that, and then we can close out. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand, and I guess who's my runner? Jewel. Thank you.
That's good. I had the first question.
Perfect.
Hello, thank you again for speaking tonight. Ooh. I wanted to say a common theme I've noticed tonight is voice, perspective, and things of that such. And as a Black woman, and you stated earlier, coming into a zone where a lot of your counterparts or colleagues don't look like you. And so that may lead to, and I don't want to make any assumptions, that voice trying to be silenced. And if that has happened to you, how did you deal with that?
That is a very good question. So I think that first of all, I did not become a Black woman when I became a legislator, right? And I say that to point out the fact that my voice has been tried to be silenced for many, many, many years. Being a Black woman who is a physician is rare, especially here in California. Being a Black woman who is a surgeon is very rare, especially here in California. When I joined faculty at UCSD in the OBGYN department, I don't think they had ever had a Black person on their OBGYN faculty before I got there. At the Children's Hospital, I think I'm still the only Black active, like, surgeon or surgical subspecialty at the Children's Hospital there. So when I came here, not being, or people not wanting to hear or listen or respect me and what I have to bring was not new. When I joined the Assembly in April of 2021, being at that time one of 2 physicians in the Assembly of 80, and the only Black female physician, it was like, what committee do you think I should have been on or would have been put on? Health, right? You think I was put on health?
No.
I was not. I was not.
No, you weren't.
I was not, right? And, you know, a wise individual told me, he said, Akilah, you can be influential in health without being on health committee. And after I calmed down, I said, you're right. And you have to have thick skin. I developed that. I see you have. I see what you're wearing, right?
First defining.
And, you know, did you go undergrad?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, like I did. So you learn thick skin when you pledge. And you have to bring that into life, right? And make sure that they do see you when you want to be seen. Sometimes it's an advantage to not be seen. And they hear you. And with time, that recognition of, okay, this person's not going away, and maybe they do actually know something that I should listen to, it happens. But I think when you are a woman and you are a minority, you deal with this every day, and being in the legislature is no different.
Any other questions? Yes, sir?
Thank you. Well, I'm not going to ask you about, Antonio Harvey, California Black Media. Khalil, I'm not going to ask the question about reparations because you took care of that. Thank you. But I do want to emphasize the fact that what you were talking about earlier, how the highway federal system were cutting through certain cities. There were like 41, 42, and that was the Federal Highway Act of 1957, okay, which, you know, causing all these environmental hazards within the Black community. So thanks for bringing that up. But your mom, Secretary Weber, who was from Hope, Arkansas, by chance, and your family migrated here under certain violent circumstances, if you don't mind me saying, during the Red Summer, which around 1917, around World War I. I just want to know, you know, with your family drifting, you know, from a place like the South, Arkansas, to the West Coast, California, how did that reflect on you? Because obviously, you know, the history, because I know, you know, of course, Dr. Weber, Secretary Weber, you know, speaks of it all the time. And I was always intrigued about how Black folks from that area migrated out here to the West Coast and how it affected, you know, their families. You growing up, you know, in a professional setting, you know, now your mom's, you know, a legislator, now you're a legislator, you know, / physician. How has it affected your life, you know, knowing that that type of history has a lot to do with you, though you were probably 3 or 4 generations in right now? How did that have an effect on your life today?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So, you know, my mom has told the story many times of how her family, or the Nash family, ended up in California from Arkansas. My grandfather was a sharecropper. He and my uncle, who just recently passed away, went to the way station. The white man would not give him the correct amount of money. He did not bow down. They then were planning on killing him. And so he had to essentially be snuck out of Arkansas in the middle of the night before they were able to come and kill or lynch my grandfather. And so he came to California. My maternal great-grandmother was already here. So he came, got a job, and then everybody else came out, and my mom was 3 when they relocated. So, you know, and my father, like I said, he was born in a little hick town in Louisiana and then ended up in New Orleans. And, you know, because they did not value education for Black people, the expectation was that once he got into middle school that he would leave and go and work on the fields. And that is not what he planned on doing for himself. And so he left Louisiana as a young teen and ended up here in California, and eventually he stayed with some relatives, but worked his way through high school and then community college and then law school. And so both of those backgrounds created a very interesting scenario for both my brother and I. You know, my parents did not run from their past. They did not try to hide it. My mother, also being a professor and one of the founding members of the Black Studies Department at San Diego State, was also very well aware of African history, Black history. You know, she did her dissertation on Marcus Garvey and Garveyism. And so all of these things created 2 very dynamic individuals that were grounded in who they were and what kind of children they wanted to raise. And so even though both of my parents were professionals, we lived in the inner city. They would not move to suburbs. We went to inner city public schools. I had the Crips and the Bloods at my elementary school, and, you know, and my secondary school, because it was 7 through 12. We went to church in the community. And so it gave me a sense of who I am and allowed me to be comfortable with who I am, and in really any setting. So I could be in the inner city, I could be in a La Jolla kind of situation, and I know how to move and interact. But I also don't forget who I am, where I come from, and what has happened to Black Americans as a whole, and the fact that we need to make sure that we are always giving back and keeping doors open and fighting for those that do not have or did not have as much. So it was a very interesting dynamic, one of which I would not have changed for this world, but it allowed me to get a very good grounding of who I am. And then going to a historically Black college and university also helped with that as well.
Dr. Weber, Dr. Shirley Weber, your mom was a professor. I'm not sure if she's still teaching of ethnic studies at San Diego State, and I heard she did not play in the classroom, so that makes sense that her dissertation was on Garvey and Garveyism.
Yes,
so yeah, we don't, Garveyites don't play about their Black nationalism for sure.
Yeah, yep.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Weber is your 3rd year now, right, in April? 3rd year in the Assembly. Is that like law school? 3 years of law school?
Yeah.
Have you heard and learned a lot about law that way?
Have I heard and learned about what?
The law.
Oh, the law. I have. I think I probably learned more when I was on city council in La Mesa, because I didn't have, it was just me. So I'm reading through these things and I'm like, what does this mean? What does that mean? I'm calling up my lawyer friend. But I have learned a lot about law here in California, how things work, how they should not work, how people can bend the law, or interpret the law to their benefit and sometimes to others' detriment. And so it is often fluid and not a rigid or stagnant thing based on who's interpreting it and who's using it, which I often find very interesting.
So I'm going to take you to now, you're a lawmaker. Do you think your path would have been different had you done what your dad wanted you to go to law school as opposed to medical school, and then the detour, right?
That is a great question. I don't think I would be here. Yeah, I don't think I would. I think that my ability to be in the health field and understand the intersection of everything and how that impacts health is what has been my biggest driver to coming up here. So yeah, I don't think I would. No one's asked me that before. That's a good question.
And here's the third one. In Kern County, we have a very Hispanic community, and we have the first
Yes.
Sikh
Dr.
American,
Baines.
Jasmeet Bains, who is also a physician. So are you finding now that you've got company?
I do have company, and it's good because it's myself, Dr. Baines, and Dr. Joaquin Arambula. I am looking to go over to the other house, though, where I will be by myself. There are no physicians in the Senate at this point. When Dr. Pan, who is around from this area, termed out. So, but it is good to have other physicians around as well. Yeah. Thank you.
So we get to see you on the Senate side soon?
That's the plan.
Yeah. We talked about that in class, Professor O'Neill. I think at least to contextualize some of the benefit or the reasons why a member would want to advance from the Assembly to the Senate is it's different, a smaller cohort of colleagues to, bargain with, I guess, if you will. And I often call, as a Capital Morning student who's studying corporate law and business law, that it's still a negotiation that occurs between the legislators in both houses, but often, within your own house as to what bills you're going to take and what amendments or what the language is. So a smaller cohort of folks you need to negotiate with sometimes makes it easier to come to compromises that don't deviate from your initial introduced idea. But then also the power dynamic of being a senator and having the experience and being a more senior legislator in that building and what that may or may not come with, I guess.
Yeah, I don't really focus on those kind of terms. People say, "Oh my God, senator," or "Oh my God, assembly member," and I think that's one of the things with my health background. It's like I'm not up here for me. I'm really not. There's a lot of sacrifice with me being here. I am here to do the work. And when I looked over on the other side, they have that void. There are no health professionals over there right now. That's number one. Number two, that seat is currently being vacated by Senator, was our most recent pro tem until recently, Tony Atkins, who is a very powerful force and a very, an amazing legislator representing the Senate District 39. And whoever steps into that seat needs to be able to really hit the ground running to continue that representation. And so those are the reasons why I have decided to go over or try to go over to the red carpet. Not necessarily for the title, but recognizing that there is a lot of work that still needs to be done and that there is a void that needs to be filled so that work can be done.
I smirked earlier when she said folks' interpretation, statutory interpretation impacts, because I guess you guys are, taking statutes and statutes interpretations this year as second year or second semester 1L students. And I think one of the first few cases in like the first 4 weeks was U.S. v. Smith, and that was a case where the placement of a comma dictated the outcome. And that was probably where I was actually like, oh, okay, Justice Scalia, I'm actually agreeing with you for one of the few times that I agree with Justice Scalia's interpretation of the law and has a positive outcome for a man who was charged with possession of a firearm and the use of that in that case. And the fact that, we still remember that from a year later is actually crazy. But, how that interpretation, based on the English language is something that our communities often aren't introduced to or really understand, to be able to make the subtle arguments. So when we're reading a statute, you don't realize that the placement of an Oxford comma or the lack thereof can have the implications to either send someone to jail or not based on interpretation, and that sets the law of the land as it relates to common law. And that's why I think, as you mentioned, the law degree is very beneficial because it teaches you to see small details like that and think like that, and then apply that to what you already know, whether it's health, economics, physiology, whether it's kinesiology, whatever you want to focus on. It provides you that aspect to see and think like an attorney or a lawmaker would, while also providing your own background and experiences.
Yeah, and I think, again, with the recognition that not everybody can go to law school, not everybody wants to go to law school, but those that do go need to remember where they come from, so that they take that knowledge that most of us have no clue about, but use it for the benefit and the betterment of the community that oftentimes had done so much to support you and help you get to where you are, that at the end of the day, it is, responsibility to go back. We talk a lot in my household growing up, to whom much is given, much is required. And that has, been a driving force for me, trying to instill it in my two boys now. Maybe they'll get it one day, but it is real.
And then you mentioned reaching back, and then we'll close on this, and then, just do a close out and do some quick pictures with Bolsa and some of the students and meet and greet. But you mentioned reaching back, and that's something we learned early on, at least in my family. I grew up in the Nation of Islam in Oakland, so very much Black nationalism is installed in me as well, and it reflects clearly in my advocacy and my writing as well. But we learned early on about Sankofa, the West African principle of reaching back as well. So if you see in a lot of our academic spaces that have recognized that you have the Sankofa bird that's looking back, it's always it's looking back to pull forward. As you mentioned, that's something that if you study that or have that as a foundation, you'll always be open to and constantly doing. So you think you're doing, of course, a great job. Not that I have any bad authority on the matter, but in installing that in others, and that being why you're here today, so you can constantly or be the epitome of what you stand on, is reaching back and influencing the next generation of students to become lawmakers or become advocates overall, not only for yourselves, but for our community. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And I think we can always learn a lot from African symbols and meaning. And I think where our society is headed, especially with certain things like, that recent overturn of affirmative action as well, we are going to need to rely on each other and some of the beliefs in terms of communities. And I listened to a radio show on Urban View on Sirius Radio, and every day she talks about one of the different Kwanzaa principles, because that is really how we are going to be able to build each other up in a society that at times is doing everything it can to kind of tear us down or tear us apart or keep us separate. So, the Sankofa bird is something that I look at, and I think I even have one in my office. Very important meaning.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.